Hey everybody, it is that time of year again. We're doing a 2025 Warframe tier list. Before we get to the actual rankings though, I have two things for y'all. Firstly, just the rules for this tier list. Helmet is going to be considered here. Being such a large part of the game, I feel that it would be weird to not include it when almost every single build in the game utilizes one, and the build variety they open up is just immense. I will try to keep talking about it to a minimum, but in some cases it really does boost a frame up a tier or so. I will also not be considering level cap or anything past the couple hour mark, as almost no one, myself included, actually does that. Tier-wise, there is going to be an S tier, one for frames that are just so strong they work in any area of the game incredibly well and can be played at any level to great success and have little to no issues with their kit. And then A tier will be split into two with A+ and A-. A lot of Warframes do fit into the A tier, which is a good thing, yet there are clearly some that are better than those below A tier, but not some that would fit within a generalized A tier. Because of that, there will be a distinction between the two. B tier frames struggle a little bit with just their base kits and aren't as widely applicable to most everything in the game as the upper tier frames, but with the right builds and missions, they too can succeed relatively well. This is about as average as a frame gets. C tier Warframes have some power, but it is rare in Warframe to find characters that are just completely useless, but they could also definitely benefit from some changes, and in my opinion, are not worth playing in most scenarios. D and F tier won't be used here. No frames fit the bill of what I would call F or D tier, and putting them here would just be the meme when in reality, all Warframes can be played with a varying level of success. And finally, this is my tier list video. While I'm trying to keep it as objective as possible, some subjectivity is going to leak in regardless. I promise I'm doing my best to view these frames within a vacuum, and just because your favorite frame may not rest in what rank you think it doesn't completely invalidate your opinion. The beauty of Warframe is that pretty much every frame can be played successfully. So again, understand this is me trying to be as objective as possible. Anyways, here is the list for 2025. Starting off with Ashe, who has seen some of the least change of any Warframe on this list ever since I started doing these annually. Ashe is just too slow for a modern day Warframe. His 1 is absolutely useless. No, being able to armor strip 2 enemies per cast is not useful in a modern day Warframe setting. Invisibility is always going to be strong, but on such a short timer, when other things like evade from Citrine are helmet abilities, this one pales in comparison. The only true saving grace would be Blade Storm, but even this one struggles to keep up with enemy spawns in any sort of Steel Path content, the reason as to why I call him slow gameplay wise. Ashe could honestly really use a rework, but I doubt something like that will happen due to his popularity and mix of nostalgia, even when his kit is pretty lacking. C tier, unfortunately, as the possibility for this Warframe to be incredibly strong is there, but currently lacks any of the sort to actually perform. Atlas is an interesting frame that, as I said last year, is carried so insanely hard by his first ability and stat sticks that if the interaction were removed, he would go down to D tier. But as it seems, even with that interaction being on DE's radar to be looked at, it is still present in the live game at the moment this video was made, which when considering just how strong it is really enough to put him all the way up in B tier because he is both functionally immortal while spamming his 1 and can one-tap pretty much anything with the right build. There is practically nothing else worth using in this kit though, so if you really like clocking enemies in the face, he's here, but definitely needs some tune-ups outside of Landslide. Banshee is a complicated one to accurately rank. The combination of Sonic Boom with Sonic Fracture is an often overlooked but good armor strip ability that when used with Sonar allows you to deal insane amounts of damage. Almost too much damage, which is one of my main issues with her. Weapons alone, even without any sort of external buff, are crazy strong as of late, and taking a bunch of time to sonar every enemy before shooting them is admittedly very non-optimal when you could just shoot them instead and kill them just as quick. You may ask, okay, why does everyone use other sorts of damage abilities like Roar? And it's because those are toggles that once activated, passively buff your weapons, which is far easier than taking the time to cast sonar and then having to aim particularly at the weak spots it generates. The main saving grace here is that having Silence, one of the stronger abilities in the game within her base kit, is immensely useful, and throwing a Subsume over her 4th like Gloom is a strong combo. Overall B tier, because there are some boss hunting niches that she fulfills that make her strong, but an often wrongly placed Warframe. Baruuk is at first glance a very strong Warframe that absolutely deserves a spot in one of the higher tiers, but his utility is more limited than you'd think due to his restraint meter requiring a lot of enemies to keep low so you can actually use his 4th ability, which is honestly the only reason you'd ever want to play him. In most other game modes besides survival, you're gonna find it hard to upkeep that, and when you can't use the one thing that makes it worth it on a frame, well, that's definitely gonna drop them a few points. I mean, he is practically unusable on base star chart. Still though, his 1 and 3 and passive make him quite invincible regardless and puts him firmly within the A- tier, teetering on the edge of high B though. Caliban had a massive glow up from all the way down in D tier to firmly within the A+ range. Genuinely, it's kind of crazy how good he is now. His playstyle is really not all that different, but now his abilities just actually do something, whereas before, casting them would result in barely anything happening. He has the unique Tau status present, which makes applying the other statuses even easier, and considering that we are in a heavy status meta, obviously we like that. His summons are crazy good, his fort is crazy good, he is crazy good. A+. Chroma is one of the frames that resided in D tier of last year's tier list as well, and is actually going to be bumped up a whole 2 tiers because of one major addition and change, his augment of Guardian armor and the ability for Vex armor to be stacked with gun or melee kills. This single-handedly makes Chroma far more powerful in terms of damage, and where previously his only saving grace was credit farming, now he is just pretty good for other mission types. Sure, his 1 in 4 outside of credit farming absolutely need changes, but it's enough to bump him up to B tier on the lower end. Citrine, in my opinion, is way underrated when compared to the other support or healing frames like Wisp, which is crazy, because she might as well be the best one currently around. Crazy damage from her fort with the augment, infinite energy sustain, easy status priming and health regen plus damage reduction. That is literally everything you could want in a warframe ever. Full armor stripping being possible with Archon continuity and some Archon shards. Citrine is one of the easiest S tiers I will give, she is only getting better and better. Citrine is the newest warframe, and like all the warframe releases as of late, has something in their kit that makes you go, what? Perma invisibility, crazy damage multipliers, resupply being the absurdity that it is, and come on, the ability to shoot enemies through the entire map as if it didn't exist is one of those things that I'm not surprised to see in a game like Warframe, but actually playing it just makes you feel like you're cheating. But nah, that's just another character that anybody can play. Easy A+ with this one. Dagath is another commonly underestimated frame. Her vibe doesn't really give off the whole status spreader energy, but viral is gonna appear on pretty much every enemy when you fight them due to her weird size and the Doom ability. Doom is also a free damage double, itself being like Collective Curse except better in some scenarios, and her fourth ability is one of the biggest delete buttons in the game. There's not an enemy you can look at and cast this on that will not die. Dagath is a killer warframe, no pun intended, A+. Dante, the first new frame of the year, released in one of the strongest states we have ever seen a warframe drop in, and luckily he is still pretty much just as good, if not better than he was to this day. Overguard is one of the better survivability methods, and he generates it at a rate so insane he is functionally immortal. The 4 different versions of Final Verse also have crazy effects when you really look at them, adding a companion in the book, more status damage and enemy de-aggro, and the insanity that is combining a Dark with a Final Verse that just eviscerates everything. I haven't even mentioned Noctua being a really strong Exalted. Dante nabs S tier on this list, and he is very deserving of it. Ember though, well, she was one of the recipients of a lighter rework this year that, while very helpful in her energy economy, didn't change her general gameplay loop of spamming her third and her fourth. Luckily, the hit registration on her third is so much better now, which is honestly the best thing to come from the rework. Her 1 augment is still pretty good for any sort of weapon focused build, as he is a very strong status with the amount that it gives. I personally would like her fourth to deal maybe like 2 or 3 times more damage than it already is, or have some added effect of scaling heat dots, because right now you really need to go all in to make it actually nuke, but otherwise she is in a good place. No, she will not get S tier purely off the skin, B tier. Equinox has seen pretty much zero change since the last video, which is both a good and bad thing. Terrify plus Maim still exists, and that is only getting better with the armor and resistance rework, but that is again kind of the only meta build that she has. Otherwise, her night form is pretty much replaced entirely by Gloom. Still, day form has a lot to offer in terms of damage buffs and team-wide ability strength, which is always appreciated. I give her an A- purely because Terrify Maim is one of the most broken things in the game right now, but without that, she'd probably be a bit closer to a high B tier. Excalibur is about as simple as they come. He is the most warframe. A cool Exalted that isn't too strong but good enough for a starter, simple damage ability in his first that new Tenno can eventually figure out how to utilize for movement, some survivability in his 2, and an area nuke in his 3. He does struggle on the steel path with not just falling over helmetless, and damage could be an issue for less experienced Tenno who are unaware of his 1 being a pseudo Exalt, but he is all around just good. Enough said, B tier. Frost also received a light rework this year, and a few things have changed. His fourth ability still carries the ever-living shit out of him. Seriously, without this, there is not a reason to use him, but Cold as a status has also been buffed significantly, and because Frost is Cold the Warframe, it being buffed has indirectly buffed him in turn. Snow Globe can now be shot through, which thank God. The 2 is still useless though, but it is a good helmet slot, and the 1 can apply cold quickly if you don't want to cast his 4th again for some reason. His augments are also really good, Biting Frost in particular giving multiplicative critical chance to some weapons, which makes him an overguard gating, full area lockdown, full armor stripping red crit frame, which is pretty solid. A-, he just keeps getting better. Gara is another frame that continues to get better not because of direct buffs to her kit, but rather as the game evolves as a whole. Nuking with her 1 and 4 combo has never been easier. Touch of Death builds have never been stronger. Shadowed Lash builds have also never been better. Besides all her personal benefits, she is also a great support and defensive warframe due to her 2's ability to be cast on most if not all objects with HP in the game. Gara is going to begin the trend of practically every frame that begins with a G being insanely strong, as she gets an A+, but Garuda, well, Garuda is going to secure the next S tier placement on this list. She has some of the easiest and namely infinite energy generation without you needing to even do much through her 3, her 1 makes her functionally immortal, and the 4th ability is in contention for one of the strongest abilities in the entire game. Even more insane is that her passive is like Roar, except stacking up to 100% and applying to weapons and abilities, which is uncommon. She works in any area of the game, she can't die, she kills everything with ease, and is about as good as any S tier frame gets. As I said with Gauss up next, the G frames are always crazy good, with Gauss 2 grabbing an S tier rank. In just 1 ability, he gets more melee damage, energy generation, and pure invincibility. Add in all the weapon buffs imaginable, Thermal Sunder being Thermal Sunder, and best of all, Go Fast the button, which can group enemies with the augment. Gauss has pretty much got all of it. He also definitely has one of the more interesting kits in terms of ability synergies because there are interactions present here between each ability in many different ways. I know he had a fun time making this one because of all this, and if every frame released with the same level of synergy, that would be really cool. S tier, obviously. Grendel is also an automatic high placement for one reason, having the untouched nourish within his base kit, but besides that, both pulverize and regurgitate armor stripping and dealing damage makes him hard to play incorrectly. You kinda can just cast your abilities and they will do stuff for you. It does suck that he cannot just eat entire maps since his rework, but the trade-off of that is getting a crazy high stacking armor bonus that more than makes up for it in my opinion, A+. Gyre 2 is, again, really good, though this frame is specifically under one condition, that you use her with a very specific helmet in Pillage, as the 2 things that she needs to function are an armor strip and survivability, which Pillage provides very well. With Pillage, she is absolutely fantastic either as an ability DPS frame or a gun zerker, and I am taking Helmet into consideration for this list, so I stand by giving her an A-, though her base kit does lack a few things I deem necessary, yet it doesn't hold her back when utilizing everything the game offers us, as the rest of her kit contains an energy regen, AoE damage, grouping, weapon critical chance buff. She is a solid A-. Harrow, on the other hand, is an okay warframe in my opinion. He is the most weapons platform in the game, with some team-wide support aspects that, funnily enough, require your teammates to not play the game. Thoroughboy needs Harrow himself to get kills to generate energy, and even though the augment kind of alleviates that, they have to be chained by his 1, which has one of the more annoying and finicky casts in the game. Said 1 is also just Pillage, but worse, and yeah, sure, you can charge Incarnates with it easily if you have trouble hitting headshots, but I don't think that's worthy enough to make him any higher than the rank I give him. It's not all bad though, he does work, he just feels a little dated these days, but he's still alright. Low B tier. Hildryn received a light rework this year that mainly changed the function of Balefire and Aegis Storm, her 2 weakest abilities. The first got an augment that made it far stronger, and the second got a lot of QOL changes, including the ability for other abilities to be cast while it is active, including Pillage. And honestly, yes, thank God. Speaking of though, Pillage is obviously really good, and Haven is a great team support ability, giving Hildryn and everyone else 3.5 second shield gates. She is a solid A-. Hydroid is still incredibly good, no surprise there. His 1 with the augment is great for armor stripping and viral priming, the 2 is solid grouping, the 3 gives some of the craziest amounts of armor and corrosive damage I have ever seen, which allows him to run both corrosive and viral at the same time. His 4th ability gives extra loot with the augment and also procs a lot of corrosive. Hydroid is an incredibly strong frame I recommend to most everybody, another S tier frame right here. Inaros got a rework too, one of what seems like 20 frames who did to be honest, and he is also in a really good spot. His changes were less severe than frames like Hydroid or Grendel, but impactful in allowing him to actually do something instead of just being a tank and not die. The Sand Kavats have a lot of utility, there's some cool finisher tech, and of course the tanking stuff that he has always been known for. Overall, he's just a good frame though, not crazy strong in any way, just good. I'd give him a B tier. Ivara is annoyingly meh. Invisibility is accessed in far easier ways nowadays that also don't lock you into being slower than a snail without excessive investment into not. Honestly, still. Harkening back to last year is her main use of AFK farming, which as I said, is less of a testament to her kit's strength and more just Warframe as a game being unintentionally manipulated. The rotating arrows ability does pretty much nothing, Navigator is cool but useless, and Artemis Bow is just as far as Exalteds go. She is just being power crept, C tier. Jade is also pretty meh to me. She is the only frame that released this year that I did not make a video on because I don't really enjoy her all that much. Her 1 in 4 combo is good, but can't straight up beat any sort of AoE weapon, and Ophinum Eyes is kinda slow all things considered when things like Terrify exist. The best part of her kit is definitely her second ability for its rotating buffs, but overall, she's alright, nothing too crazy, high B tier. On the opposite side of the spectrum is a Warframe that is about as meta as you can get with Khora. Whipclaw is the strongest pseudo-exalt in the game by far, one-tapping enemies all the way to level cap, and Snare is also one of the best grouping tools in the game, and Strangledome is fantastic area lockdown, but importantly, with the augment also gets her extra loot. Subsume Lycast Hunt over her third, and now she is immortal, gets extra loot, and one-taps any enemy in a 10-meter radius that is infinitely spammable. Yet Khora is the definition of S tier. Koumei released this year and had one of the more tumultuous receptions that I've seen from people arguing she is either incredibly strong or actually pretty bad, and I rest somewhere in the middle. The dice rolling aspect is really cool, but her 1 in 4 are literally the same thing. It's honestly a little odd that they shipped this Warframe with 2 incredibly alike abilities, one of them just being outright better than the other. Omakuji also is not strong enough with its reduced pool of decrees to warrant having a 3-minute cooldown once you stack a few of them, and Omamori is an awful survivability tool. It really needs to be buffed, it genuinely sucks. Something I saw that I agree with pretty hard is that Koumei has all the lows of gambling and none of the highs, but I'm not grading on how well a Warframe achieves their vision, still, she gets a low B. Kullervo, similar to Khora though, is one of the better frames in the game, not because of extra loot or anything, but because there is not an enemy unit that Kullervo cannot kill, even with a Mark 1 bow, or a tile set that he cannot nuke immediately. Wrathful Advance and Collective Curse are genuinely some of the most broken abilities to exist in the game, and while Storm of Ukko is typically subsumed over, it too is really good. Crazy good weapon buffs, good survivability, nuking, again, about as easy as an S tier can get here. Lavos is actually going to be ranked this year, and quite highly might I add, mainly due to Valen's formation though. Look, he still desperately needs some QOL, but his nuking capabilities have not gone unseen and he is now one of the best weapon platforms in the game, enough to put him all the way up in the A- tier. Limbo hasn't seen pretty much any change for quite a while, and is still so heavily dependent on the player behind him that it's hard to rank him any higher than B tier because of just how easy it is to screw him up. And even then, he's kinda getting power crept with a lot of newer weapons, arcanes, warframes, and stuff that just make what he does unnecessary, especially with the knowledge required to actually make it even slightly useful. C tier, potential for low B if the player knows what they're doing. Loki is my least favorite frame to rank. I think Loki is not good, but his 2 is also the easiest survivability button in the game because pure invisibility is the strongest method of surviving, yet, okay. So this frame does nothing except not die. Warframe is not a hard game. Not dying is not hard. So yeah, sure, he can level cap super easily, but why do it on him when you could just play a frame that actually has abilities that do something and also not die? Because again, surviving has never been easier. Honestly, low C tier, Loki ain't it. Mag, the recipient of my most recent perfected episode, is getting an S tier ranking, no surprise there. She has everything: grouping, the ability to one-shot anything and then nuke the entire tile afterwards, fantastic crowd control and a full armor strip, and that full armor strip will refill your entire shields and overshields. Don't sleep on Mag, go watch that video, she is an amazing frame. Mesa follows Mag with another high rating in the S tier. She is fantastic for exterminates or any other quick mission type due to just how strong regulators are when you invest into them. She's also super tanky with Shadow Shield, giving more than the expected 90% DR at 95%, and Shooting Gallery with the augment is the best crowd control ability in the game, hands down. Mirage is just eh. She falls behind the modern day weapons platform frames for one main reason: she doesn't buff or apply statuses in any meaningful way. By that I mean, Sarin applies Corrosive and Toxin innately. Cyto 9 can apply any status he wants, Hydroid does free Corrosive with a free full strip, Mirage is just more damage, which we don't really need at this point. Hall of Mirrors ain't bad though, definitely her saving grace, middle B tier. Nekros brings us back up to take a spot in the S tier for giving us the easiest looting ability in Desecrate, requiring you not to do anything like any of the other loot frames. Terrify is also one of the better abilities in the games, and summons, like the ones from Soul Punch or namely Shadows of the Dead, are getting some crazy buffs with every update. I really want to do a video on that particular setup. Again, Nekros gets an S tier. Nezha got one of the craziest augments we have ever seen that converted him into, surprisingly, the best nuke warframe in the game. But otherwise, he's good. A good tanking ability and a relatively mediocre 2 and 4, excluding the nuke, his 1 being pure flavor. All of it is enough to garner him an A+, but without the nuking stuff, he's probably a bit closer to an A-. Nidus feels really outdated to me. His abilities don't really feel like they do all that much, and what effects are actually noticeable in game don't feel all that strong. He has a cool death negation ability, and the energy refunding or grouping is nice, but I believe he could use some changes, B tier at best. Nova though, well, she surprisingly got a quote-unquote light rework that made her even better than she already was. Surprisingly, her 4th was already quite good, and now we can use the slower speed version whenever we want and get health or energy with it. Crazy, enough to put her all the way up into the S tier. Nyx got a rework in 1999, and wow, what a great tune-up. She genuinely feels exactly how I'd always wanted her to play when I first got her. Seriously, I was going to make a Nyx video but decided against it a long time ago because I didn't really like her. Gemini skin aside, I really do now. Psychic bolts are in a good spot with the armor reduction defense stat steal. Chaos is just chaos, which is good. The enemy turn is quite strong. Absorb with the augment is nuts. Really good job on this rework, A-. Oberon though. Yeah, he is a frame that for every year I've made this tier list, have expected him to be reworked within the following year, and he still hasn't gotten one. I'm not sure why, because he really needs it. Radiation is now a shit status, which is saying something because previously it only served a purpose because of its damage multi against certain factions, but now, because that is gone, it is entirely useless, a dead element honestly. What's surprising to me is that someone doesn't just go in and double all of his stat values, because even that would make him so much better. His abilities are also an example of bad synergies. Some of their effects need to be decoupled from one another. An ability should not feel like it's only doing something when used with another. It should have a powerful base effect that is elevated by another one, like Dagath with Weird Size and Doom. Renewal is pretty good, but kills him energy-wise, and the grass is such a joke. I have a funny memory of 2016 Kai playing Oberon, casting my abilities and not having a single fucking clue what was happening. Genuinely hilarious. C tier. Octavia. Like, does Octavia get an S just cause she's Octavia? I'm gonna put my foot down and say no. The game has elevated so far past a frame like her being the top of current power scaling because surviving is again stupid easy, and damage has never been higher. And in terms of AoE nuking, so many frames do it better and quicker. She's gonna get an A+, but S is just, nah, she ain't deserve it. She's a boring frame. She has the ability to be so cool with her music theme in the Manticord, but she sells because all you do is cast and then spam crouch. Boring frame. Protea though, man, I love this frame. Grenade Fan is amazing damage and probably the best survivability you have ever seen. 5-second shield gate, yeah. Blaze Artillery beats most everything in the damage ability category, especially with the augments. Dispensary is great utility, and her 4th ability, again with the augments, is way better than you think. Just get used to it, I did, and I love it now. Another easy S tier, everyone should play Protea. Corvex is not amazing, but not bad. His abilities all do stuff, noticeable things at that, but what really motivates me to place him in B tier is that when I compare him to any frame above B tier, I'm like, yeah, Corvex is not as good as them. And the B tier frames I would say he is quite equal with, so yeah, Corvex is fine, like the hardest fine ever, B tier. Revenant though, gonna go ahead and say it, A-. Not S tier, not A+, cause not being able to die is not worthy of S tier. It really isn't. And besides that part of him, what does he do? Sure, without Mesmer skin, he's really like a low C tier or a low B, and that definitely brings him up to an A-, but come on. Nobody uses Reeve anyways. Revenant players might as well not know its inability. Rhino is literally Revenant if he were actually good. Base Roar is crazy strong. Iron Skin is also crazy strong. Stomp is way better grouping and crowd control than people think, and Charge is really just used to stack up those 2 billion Iron Skin memes, but it has merit. He's yet again another frame that as the game evolves, so does he, because Roar is coded as faction damage, and our status meta loves faction damage, especially when you can get it at such high amounts from this ability. Rhino video for sure to come with his heirloom skin, S tier. Another S though, as you absolutely expected, is Saren. She's still the best weapons platform in the game, no doubt. Armor strip everything, toxic lash being toxic lash, ESO nuking, easy shield gating. Corrosive shards really just took this frame from a 100 out of 10 to a 1000 or something. I love it. S tier. Sevagoth though, look, he has been on the up and up for quite a while, beginning as the Gloom Subsume frame and then becoming a good weapons platform to competing for best nuke in the game with Nezha with his 1 and 2 combo. And even that whole sentiment of him being just a Gloom Subsume is crazy, because he has Gloom in his base kit. It's still just as good there, and he can use another helmet with it. Sevagoth is in a great place, A+. Styanax is another frame that is locked so far within the endgame, requiring you to finish the new war and then go through a multi-week grind to obtain, which really shouldn't be the case, as I believe him to be one of the most versatile frames within the game that new players should really have access to. A grouping ability, armor and shield strip with health regen, energy regen and threat level increase, and a DPS ability. That is pretty much everything a Warframe needs right there, and his kit flows so well with each other. He is a great support too. I really should make a Styanax video. Easy S tier. Titania is another difficult to rank frame because I don't actually believe she is all that good besides her fort ability. Her 1 through 3 don't actually do much of anything useful for the playstyle her fort ability likes, and even then, the Dex Pixia are strong, but their immense precision required to still be a single target weapon is annoying at best and straight up non-optimal at worst. A frame like Cyto 9's Exalted Sniper is single target in nature, but actually has an AoE mechanic present in the ricochets, and if Dex Pixia got a dual Toxicist type ricochet, Titania would become so much better. Still though, she can speedrun quite well with Thermal Sunder, so she gets a B. Trinity's rework relative to Nyx was less impressive in my opinion, but absolutely turned her from one of the worst frames in the game to passing. Her identity as a healer is still present, but far more functional now. Similar to what I recommended for Oberon, her changes were less entire ability reworks and more just bringing them up to current day Warframe standards. Not the most insane frame you'll ever see, but if you really want to feel like a support, Trinity fulfills that fantasy quite well, and also, it's just good. B tier. Valkyr is, in my opinion, the brand new worst Warframe in the game. Her 1 through 3 are not all that useful. Sure, more attack speed is nice, but it's not really a stat that we are fiending for that much these days, and Hysteria is the sole reason she's not a D tier Warframe. But even with this one, she's not all that good. Being relegated to slide attacks for an entire mission because they are the only move in the set that actually does something and feels good, feels like shit. Valkyr absolutely needs to be reworked the most of any frame, and I really hope she does, though honestly, it'd have to be less of a Trinity or Nyx type rework and more Hydroid or Grendel in my opinion, because she needs help. Low C tier. Vauban is another frame that, like Oberon, really could use some number adjustments to become much better and a few QOL changes. He's not bad per se, but his abilities feel hard to notice in gameplay as their effects scale in odd ways that isn't initially apparent to someone getting their hands on him for the first time. I mean, when was the last time you saw a Vauban in a public match? Low B tier. Vault though, he's gonna come in and grab the next S tier placement for being one of the craziest frames in the game, not just for boss fights or anything, but just in general. Seriously, the Okina Prime Incarnate with Influence and Wrathful video that I did is so genuinely absurd. I love that build. He is great for speedrunning, outputs a ton of damage, can focus farm while his AoE nuke is good for ESO, and he's also a starter frame. And of course, Eidolon hunts. To be honest, he has it all. S tier. Varuna comes in after that with another high placement, as she too is quite strong. I feel like she's a little bit overlooked because the complexity present in her kit with the passive switching and the admittedly awful explanation of her abilities in game definitely doesn't help. But once you get a good understanding of her, throw on some augments and then get to playing, she really shows up. I have yet to do a video on her, and unless she gets yet again another augment, I doubt I will into her prime because her popularity is kinda but maybe I'll do a short or something. A+. Wisp is Wisp. The frame that everyone regards as the best healer for whatever reason, and also loves for, yeah, you know. Wisp is good, no doubting that. The moats provide some of the better bonuses in the game in a very easy way at high percentages. Will-O-Wisp is crazy good survivability. Iframes, who doesn't love them? Breach Surge is Breach Surge, and her fourth is not great. But in the helmet meta we live in today, having a very easy to decide best slot for that thing is always good. Wisp isn't as good as Citrine in terms of support or healing in my opinion, but still good enough to garner an S tier, albeit a lower one than her. Wukong is probably the best speedrun frame in the game that nobody knows about. Throw Molt on him and Cloudwalker becomes incredibly fast and he zips through missions like nothing. If anything, he is definitely the best spy frame too because that ability bypasses lasers, but even for captures, etc, he kinda destroys the competition in terms of speed. In general gameplay though, he is alright. The speedrunning stuff being similar to Titania where it kind of carries him, and after the slam build changes, best I can do is a high B, potential for a low A-. Zaku, the most recent Prime, also has not seen any major changes in quite a while, but still continues to be incredibly good, one of the best in my opinion. The scaling present in their auto-firing grasp of lock guns is still one of the things that I'm like, damn, that's actually in the game. Zada's Whisper, while probably being subsumed off most because it is a helmet that is better suited for other frames, is still present here at base, and it's Zada's Whisper. Come on. Zaku nabs an easy S tier. Let's keep it rolling though with Yreli. Yreli better not still be catching heat for being bad, cause she's an A+, hands down. So you don't like riding around on Marolina. Okay, use the augment and now it spits out the 400% damage vulnerability orbs that also crowd control enemies every 0.5 seconds or so by itself. You still get all the benefits from normally riding it too. Your secondaries, which are some of the strongest weapons in the game right now as of late, are getting crazy buffs from her, and you have a massive grouping tool. Yreli is really good. Don't even try to say that she's not A+. Lastly, like every year though, there is Zephyr, ending us off with another S tier placement because she is absolutely in the top 10 or even top 5 warframes in the game. Some of the best invincibility present, movement or infinitely scaling damage in her 1, great grouping with a crazy high damage scaling augment for her 2, and tornadoes. Man, y'all ain't ready for the Zephyr video that I have planned because 50,000 EHP scaling, yeah, coming next month for sure. Zephyr gets an S tier, one of the more deserving ones might I add. But with her, we have finished the list, guys. That took a while, but I hope you enjoyed. Remember that this is at the end of the day, my opinion. It is me trying to be as objective as possible, but some subjectivity is going to leak within the list. If your favorite frame or frames are not ranked where you think they do, that is fine, and I invite you to present your case within the comments nicely. These are my takes, don't take them all too hard. All this serves to do is give someone a quick rating of a frame they may be interested in, but really any frame within the game is viable. It is a great thing when the worst warframe in the game is C tier, which is the average tier. You can play any warframe and be successful. There are just some that are better than others. So thank you for watching. An even bigger thank you to my YouTube and Patreon supporters who without their help, I could not do what I do. Thank you. I will see you all soon for a crazy packed January. 2025 going to be the year we hit 100,000. Happy to have you all on this journey with me. I will see you soon. Peace.